Anime games on Roblox are probably the most popular games on the platform, behind the brain rot slop that I always complain about. They always promise flashy powers, cool combat mechanics, and the ability to live out your favorite anime moments in an open world. The recent release of the Demon Slayer Infinity Castle movie reminded me of how popular Demon Slayer games were at one point. So obviously, the first thing I did was revisit Demon Slayer RPG 2. It was the first game that I played like almost every day with my buddies back when Demon Slayer was first getting animated and all of its Roblox game adaptations were popping up. Obviously, basically nobody plays Demon Slayer RPG 2 anymore, so I went on to look for active Demon Slayer games. That's when I came upon Demonfall. Demonfall has that kind of classic Roblox anime game vibe to it. It can mostly be attributed to the blocky kind of low quality graphics that were prevalent during the time of early Roblox anime games like Demon Slayer RPG 2 or Shindo Life. There's a pretty mediocre character selection screen, and I only say it's mediocre because of the lack of choices for some of the character parts. When you finally load into the game, you're met with a tutorial section where you find your family murdered by a demon. From here, you have two options: either defeat the demon and become a demon slayer, or die to the demon and become a demon. Now, the option you pick here isn't permanent, as there are items in the game that let you become a demon or demon slayer, or even a hybrid. After the completion of this tutorial, you're thrust into the world with little direction. There are storylines for both demon slayers and demons, which are pretty okay, I guess. The best way I can sum this game up is it's unbalanced. Pretty obvious that certain breathing styles and blood demon arts are significantly more powerful than the rest, not to mention how the storyline pacing feels off regardless of whether you're a demon slayer or a demon. I mean, you can pretty much just blitz through the entire story, and there's little to no direction in game, so 90% of the time you're just gonna end up having to Google some tutorial to find what you're looking for. Games should teach you as you play, not force you to alt-tab every 5 minutes just to Google a guide or watch a YouTube tutorial. It is a pretty prominent issue across anime games here on Roblox, but obviously I'm still gonna complain about it. At its core, Demonfall is basically just a grind simulator. I like to throw around the term bandit beater to describe this genre, and I feel like it's the most accurate description possible. You spawn in, find some generic NPCs, and then repeat the same cycle over and over, accepting some slop quest to beat up some bad guys, rescue some dude, whatever it is. It's just generic quest slop, and then you return to the quest giver only to do it again. There's no real variety, evolving mechanics to keep you engaged. It's just endless repetition. And sure, grinding is a part of a lot of anime games, but there's a difference between grind that feels rewarding and grind that feels like you're wasting your time. Unfortunately, Demonfall, well, it leans way too hard towards the latter. The enemy design doesn't help either. To put it bluntly, the enemies aren't great. They're not interesting or creative, and most of them barely feel like they were designed at all. Almost every single enemy is extremely easy to solo, including most bosses. They're unbelievably easy, in fact, to the point that PvE is so boring, it's almost unbearable. Because of this, it just feels like there's no real progression, no real challenge to be had anywhere. Instead, it's just punching bags and damage sponges, and neither of those make for fun gameplay. And the real kicker, even if you do push through the grind, the game just falls off so hard. Like, you think after finishing the storyline, there's gonna be some exciting payoff waiting for you. Maybe some secret story content, maybe more interesting bosses, or some kind of unique late game feature, but no. You complete the storyline and just spend time grinding levels or certain enemy or boss drops. Then you go ahead and prestige and do it all again. After that point, there's basically nothing. That's it. The progression curve flatlines. The game has no real direction past that moment. You're just left standing there, wondering why you put so much time into grinding for something that barely feels like it matters. And the skill tree, it's mediocre. And even worse, it doesn't even explain anything. You're staring at all these nodes and options with no context, no guidance, and no sense of how your choices are supposed to shape your gameplay. It kind of feels like the devs just threw it in there because they thought a skill tree was a necessary checkbox. And what happens when a game doesn't explain itself? You're right back to YouTube guides. I swear, like 90% of the people playing this game are surviving purely because they're watching tutorials made by other players, and that's not how it should be. A good game teaches you organically so that you'll be able to know what your options are and how they'll affect your gameplay down the line. Now, I'm not gonna pretend it's all horrible. I'll give the game some credit where it's due. When you play with your friends, it's kind of fun. The repetitive grind is definitely much easier to swallow when you're laughing through it in VC or showing off some new breathing style moves. The visuals are also pretty okay, as I mentioned earlier. They're not groundbreaking, but the animations are flashy enough to make you feel like you're in a proper anime game, and the visuals and sound effects for breathing styles and blood demon arts can be genuinely enjoyable to watch. Pulling off a flashy combo does feel good in the moment. But then the game takes that small amount of goodwill and just throws it right out of the window with exploration. I mean, why in the world did I have to travel 9 light years just to find a breathing style trainer? The game itself rarely points you in the right direction. Most of the areas of the map are just poorly designed, and the navigation itself is just overall frustrating. Instead of feeling like you're exploring a cool open world, it feels like you're wandering aimlessly, hoping to stumble into the thing you need to progress. It's just not great game design, and it feels like the devs were padding for time. And the worst part is, once you get your items or finish your quests to unlock your breathing style or blood demon art or whatever it was, the game just falls off again. It's supposed to be the big payoff, right? The big reward for all your grinding and wandering, but instead it highlights how shallow everything else is. You get your flashy powers, use them for a little while, and then realize there's nothing left to do except more grinding and fighting the same uninspired enemies. It's like the game doesn't know what to do with itself once you hit any milestone. And where the death of the game really shows is outside of PvP, the game's basically dead. There's barely a community left doing anything interesting in the open world, and the servers just feel empty most of the time. The only part of the game that's still quote-unquote active is the PvP scene, and honestly, it's like with every Roblox anime game, it's kind of unbearable. Everyone's max leveled, multiple prestiged, and sweating harder than you think is even possible for a Roblox anime game. If you're new or a casual player like myself, you're fodder. You don't stand a chance. You're thrown into the meat grinder and left to get stomped repeatedly by people who have basically every advantage in the game. It's not fun, not rewarding, and it kills whatever little motivation you had left to keep playing. And that's what really kills the game's longevity. When the only active endgame is a sweaty PvP scene that's basically impossible for most players to enjoy, you lose the majority of your audience. The casuals leave, the mid-level players burn out, and the only people that are left are the hyper-competitive audience. That might keep a small dedicated community alive, but it's not enough to keep the game relevant or enjoyable for the majority of players. So what happens? The game just quietly fades into obscurity, remembered more for what it could have been than what it actually delivered. And that really is what happened to the game. Demonfall had its moment, and honestly, it was a big one. Back during prime Demonfall, it was everywhere. Media was flooded with clips of people pulling off combos, showing off new breathing styles, or just clowning each other in PvP. YouTube guides were constantly being made to help new players figure out the most efficient ways to grind or how to unlock a certain breathing or blood demon art. If you were even remotely into Roblox anime games at the time, you couldn't escape Demonfall. It was a cultural moment, not just for Roblox, but for the whole wave of anime-inspired games that were dominating the platform, and even for those that still are. But like a lot of Roblox games, especially anime ones, the hype just didn't last. Now, Demonfall's averaging anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 concurrent players. That's not type soul levels of popularity, but it's a solid, respectable community. The problem is, once the cracks really started to show, the lack of meaningful content past early progression, the unbalanced combat, the endless grinding, players just started to drift away. And when a game relies so heavily on having an active, vibrant community to keep things alive, that decline is brutal. Servers that were once packed started to feel emptier. The game itself felt less alive, and even if you were just someone who was only getting into the game then, it was hard not to notice how much quieter things had become. Revisiting a game like Demonfall today after its quote-unquote downfall can still kind of be enjoyable. There's a certain nostalgia baked into that kind of experience, even though I know the grind is mind-numbing and PvE is mostly a snooze fest, and the PvP is dominated by sweaty max prestige players. There's something comforting about booting up the game, wandering around the familiar map and messing around with familiar powers for a while. It definitely scratches that itch of Roblox anime combat, even if only for a short time. It's not a game that I'd come back and sink dozens of hours into, but as a casual revisit, it has its charm. And that's where I think Demonfall, if not most anime games, ultimately land in the bigger picture of Roblox. It represents this kind of in-between era. On one hand, it had more ambition and polish than the older, jankier titles like DSRPG 2. On the other hand, it fell into the exact same pitfalls that nearly every Roblox anime game struggles with. Repetitive grind, shallow progression, unbalanced combat, and a lack of meaningful long-term direction. It was good enough to catch lightning in a bottle for a while, but not strong enough to sustain itself. When you compare to the current crop of anime games on Roblox, it's kind of the same story all over again. Developers now lean heavily on flashy graphics and abilities and recognizable anime branding, but they rarely build the systems that will actually keep players engaged for the long haul. Demonfall, in that sense, is kind of like the perfect case study for the entire subgenre. It shows the highs, the hype, the community energy, the viral clips, the fun moments with friends, but also the lows, the burnout, the grind fatigue, the decline into basically empty servers. So where does that leave Demonfall now? Well, in my opinion, it's another game that had its time in the spotlight and then faded into the background. But it's definitely more than worth remembering, if only because it was such a defining title for its era. People will continue to talk about Prime Demonfall the same way people talk about other old Roblox classics. It's part of the history of anime games on the platform, for better or worse. And maybe that's the takeaway here. Roblox anime games don't tend to last forever, but the ones that make an impact, even temporarily, stick with players. Demonfall might not be the best game, and it might not even be a good game depending on how harsh you want to be, but it did something that very few Roblox games managed to do. It created memories. For all its flaws, the bugs, the grind, the imbalanced systems, the unbearable PvP, it still gave players something to talk about, something to share, and something to come back to. Even if only for nostalgia's sake. So yeah, right now Demonfall is buggy, unbalanced, grindy, shallow, and unbelievably frustrating. But it's also a game that mattered, and could argue it still matters. And in a platform as chaotic and fast-moving as Roblox, that's all Demonfall needed to earn its place in the conversation. Now for the ratings. Rating it on the core meter scale, I'm gonna give Demonfall a 6 out of 10, which should landed in the C tier. It's a game that had a lot of potential, but unfortunately it was dragged down by grind, imbalance, and lack of in-game direction. As for my personal rating, I'm gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10, which should land it in about the B tier. Because I'll admit, even with all its flaws, running around with my friends and unleashing breathing styles is fun. Overall, Demonfall is a really good reminder of why Roblox anime games keep missing the mark. They have the looks, the hype, and the fandom, but when it comes to depth, they fall short. Anime fans on Roblox deserve better than grind simulators disguised as passion projects. Demonfall isn't the worst anime game out there, but it's a long way from being the best. Thank you for watching this video, and if you don't mind, leave a like for the YouTube algorithm and consider subscribing so you don't miss future installments of Just One More Game. If you've got suggestions for the next game I should play, or have thoughts on the game we reviewed today, go ahead and leave them in the comments. I love to read them. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.